What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Iron Anchor Cycles. We're back with our Police Road King and ready to get started on the second part of this video series. I won't get in too much to where we left off with the rear. If you're interested in that, go back and check out the first video. I'll of course put a link in the description below to that. But what today is gonna be about, it's gonna be about starting on this front end. And I mentioned in our last part, but I'll talk about it again here since we're gonna actually get into it today, is basically from top to bottom, this whole thing is gonna change. Just about all we're leaving from this original front end, and only temporarily, mind you, is the headlight nacelle, passing lamps, all that kind of Road King stuff up there. The reason that's going back on is because for the moment, that's what we need in order to run the headlight and turn signals and all of that. But ultimately this bike is gonna get a fairing. That's not gonna be part of this phase of the project. I've got a plan for that. I mean, might do that this winter, but for the first iteration of this build, it's gonna go back to having the traditional sort of Road King nacelle and all that up here. But everything else is gonna change. So we'll start from the top. We are gonna be doing a set of Kraus bars and risers, Kraus risers and ODI bars. And that is gonna update, obviously, our control position here. We're gonna relocate this tack gauge. Speedo's gonna stay on the dash where it belongs on a Road King. So that's gonna give us our ergonomic fix up at the top, and also obviously the aesthetics of that are great as well. So we've got some other little new parts to go along. We've got levers and grips and mirrors and all that good little stuff we'll get to when we get to it. But as we move down, the big change up here in the front is that we are swapping this bike from a 41 to a 49 millimeter front end, and we're gonna raise it 2 inches at the same time. So basically, your little history lesson for the day is Baggers had a 41 millimeter front end through 2013 and 2014 with Project Rushmore. The front end got updated to a much improved, much more rigid and much more upgradable 49 millimeter front end. So the geometry of it is very similar, although not exactly the same. And so it's not a tremendously hard swap to do if you've got the right parts and you've got the right components to go along with it. So the heart of that change is gonna be a set of triple trees that we got from Geezer Engineering. If you haven't seen what they offer, I encourage you to go check them out. They offer a lot of really cool stuff to do interesting kinds of upgrades and changes that you might not have thought were possible without the parts that they make. So their trees are going to bolt onto this frame. There's gonna be a little bit of modification needed on the frame side to get it to work, but we'll get to that. And they're gonna allow us to run 49 millimeter legs. So the 49 millimeter legs are going to be OE Harley lowers paired with 2-over tubes, and then Öhlins cartridges with 2-inch extensions. So that's gonna give us a factory-ish look. I didn't want to do something so crazy like a custom billet lower or spend the money on an inverted front end. I think what we're doing here is gonna be upgrade enough. So I think that's gonna put us right where we want. And a little side note on that, it is that 2-over front end, which is why we ran into issues in the back, realizing that we weren't gonna be able to raise the rear of the bike with the way the swing arm is a full 2 inches in order to keep the bike level. The goal here is when we're done, is to make sure that the bike sits level. We want it raised and we want it level. So that's the plan. So with that said, I'm gonna get this bike lowered down so I can start doing a little disassembly from the top down here. And we'll get the front of this bike a little bit stripped down, and I'll check back in and show you the progress we're making. Okay, so quick little update for you. Obviously we've got our tank removed here, and I hadn't even gotten any further than that and started to get a sense of what our wiring harnesses down in here are gonna look like. Now, probably it's a little difficult to make much of anything of this, but some of the positive and negative things I've found in here, let's see. Number one, that is the plug for the old siren amplifier, so that's still there, so that's a good sign. A cut wire in the middle of that harness, not a great sign. A little butt connector here, that's probably something that wasn't original. There's a couple other things. We've got some cut wires right here. We have to trace those back, and a bunch more cut wires here, and whatever this used to go to. You can presume the cut stuff was probably emergency function related because the bike runs and just about everything seems to work. So we just got some more stuff to dig into here, but to be honest, the harness looks, while not perfect and certainly not in fantastic shape, a little better than it could have. So The next thing we're gonna do here is get started with getting this headlight nacelle apart. I really would like to see what we've got going on in here in terms of wiring, and the easiest access to that, it's actually the first step in removing the nacelle, is getting the headlight out, and you can get to all that stuff from the front side. Okay, well, if under the seat looked pretty good, this is definitely where the nonsense is. So we've got a whole bunch of cut wires, open wires, butt connectors, different kind of things labeled here. This says power with pursuit switch on. I guess somebody kind of went in here and tried to figure out without a wiring diagram kind of how this mess used to work. There is just a whole lot of nonsense in here. This little treat right here, don't know what that is about. Yeah, we got some things to figure out here. So fortunately, we've got the wiring diagram, so tracing this all back shouldn't be too much of a big deal. And honestly, I think once we can get some of the known things out of here, like what runs through here, right, is you've got the, your turn signals, your passing lamps, the gauge wiring, not the tank gauge, but the tack up here, your handlebar switches. We can get all that stuff pulled out and get the known stuff out of the way. Maybe the pile of crap we'll be looking at won't be quite so bad. A guy can dream anyway. So anyway, from here, I think I'm just gonna keep disassembling. Initially, I was gonna jump right to trying to get down to the fender, but I kind of, now that I'm looking at this mess of wiring, it's stressing me out, and I kind of want to get the bars pulled off post haste so we can start to get this cleaned up a little bit. All right, so bars are still on, but that's actually okay for the time being. We got all the wiring disconnected, and this is what I wanted. I wanted to be able to start pulling this wiring harness apart and seeing what we've got, start to identify everything. So for what it's worth, I'm actually gonna leave this myself for right now. I've gotta get out of here, but I'm gonna continue with the video. So this will pick up right where I left off in about 2 seconds for all of you. So stick around, and we'll keep going on this teardown. Okay, so I was gone from this bike for a couple of days. I'm back, ready to keep going. I think where we left off here was we had just gotten the wires all disconnected in here. I went ahead and stripped the controls off the bars. So we've got that stuff sitting on the side, and we've got our clutch cable hanging down on the other side, and master cylinder obviously is sitting right here. So obviously this was all in an effort to start getting this front end disassembled. So what I'm gonna do now is, just so I can get this out of here, so ultimately we can get the fender off, is I'm gonna go ahead and take the brake system off as one complete unit. So like I mentioned, the bike doesn't have ABS, so this is a very simple system of master cylinder down to a big T here, and then down to each caliper. So if I disconnect each caliper and then pass all this stuff kind of through the back way, through the fork here, it'll all come off without taking it apart. We're eventually gonna have to replace these lower brake lines as part of the new front end, but at least for now, make a little bit less mess taking it all apart without opening it up. Okay, there we go. Brake system off. Okay, so with that out of the way, next job is to get the fender off. Now, like I mentioned, not necessarily gonna do this in the exact right way. This fender should be able to come off, and then you take the wheel off after that. Problem is, fitting this fender both with this guard on here, which I'm gonna take off, but this fender is bent back here. This is, I don't think, the way this is supposed to be. So this fender's not gonna slide through this front end either way. So I'm gonna have to get the tire off first so that I can kind of take the rest of it off as one or two pieces. So I'll kind of show you what I'm gonna do. You can jack this bike up and just pull the tire out, but with this extra, 2 inches of junk hanging off here, you'd have to jack the bike up so high that it becomes dangerous that it might roll off the lift. I mean, obviously you can strap it and do all that kind of stuff, but I'm not really a fan of strapping a bike like that because you're putting force down on the jack when you pull on it. And these jacks are kind of right at the weight capacity of these bikes as it is. So I like to try and keep it as low as I possibly can. We gotta do what we gotta do, but anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and take this off and we'll keep moving along. All right, so with the wheel removed, we should be able to get the fender out, no problem. Normally this would be even less of a big deal. If the fender wasn't bent here at the bottom, you'd just be able to slide it through even with the wheel in place. Not entirely sure you can do that on the Road Kings with this little fender skirt on here, but certainly on the other bikes you can. But here we are, this is what we're doing, and this is how we did it, so it's gonna be just fine. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the last 2 bolts holding this fender on. We'll get it out of the way, and then we'll be rolling. We'll just drop these fork tubes out, and we'll be ready to start looking at putting new parts on here. So I'm gonna get this fender gone and get these fork legs going, and we'll be rocking and rolling. Fork legs out of the way, everything else done. It's time to start getting this top and bottom triple tree off. Okay, so with the big nut removed, top triple tree comes off, and now we can take the bottom triple tree off, which is basically just it's a big star nut. And you can put a spanner on this, but usually just with like a punch and a little tap, you can get it loose, and then you can spin it all the way off and take this off. So any bets on what these neck bearings look like? I'm gonna guess they're actually okay, because this was a fleet vehicle. Let's just assume it was serviced properly and at the right intervals, but you never know. Well, they've got grease on them. That's more than I could say for a lot of bearings. Bottom one looks okay, not great. Top one, same thing, not great, but okay. Races actually look all right too. So this is actually an interesting thing I can show you here. So some bikes will have a grease fitting on the neck in theory to be able to grease these bearings. However, it doesn't work. And what I can show you is the grease fitting, if you sort of hold this up right here, the grease fitting is right here, which is right in line with this. Big blob of grease right here. There's not really like a channel or anything like that for the grease to get from this fitting up into the bearings and actually pack into them, short of filling the entire neck with grease and pushing it up and down. So, you go through and you go squirt, 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 and it goes in and here it is, but it hasn't actually gotten to either of the bearings. And you can kind of tell that because The grease that's actually on the bearings is green, and the grease that was put in through this fitting is this sort of pinkish brown color. So never really quite got there. But anyway, the bearings still had grease on them, so that's good news, I guess. We're changing these obviously to go along with our new triple trees, but it's just always interesting to kind of see what you can see when you take this stuff apart. So I'm just gonna throw that upper bearing on there just to keep it out of the way. And I'm gonna throw this dust shield on here, and I'm gonna throw this nut on here. All right, so I'm gonna put these away in the takeoff pile, get my hands cleaned up a little bit. I'm gonna do a little bit of a deep clean on this neck here and get all this grime and grease out of here, and we'll start looking at some new parts. Okay, so before we start putting new parts on and getting the fork neck prepared, I wanna show you what we got from Geezer Engineering, because I think this stuff is awesome. So in no particular order here, basically just the order that it's sitting, we've got a brake line here, and this one is a non-ABS application. They've got them for ABS applications as well. Obviously this is a lower unit, and then you just attach whatever length upper line you need, and you just do that yourself. We've got a box of some miscellaneous parts here. So we've got hardware, we've got a mount for the brake line, we've got a steering stop, neck bearings, and dust shields. The steering stop and some other pieces here are actually one of the big reasons why I like this kit as opposed to some of the others that are on the market. When I was looking at doing this, I saw a few different options from a few well-known manufacturers, and most of them do not allow you to retain, well, pretty much anything. They're kind of meant for like a race bike application. So no fork stops, which is a big deal to me, right? I mean, I want fork stops on a bike that's gonna be used on the street. No fork lock provision on a lot of them. That matters less to me, but that might matter to you. And then also, this one has the provisions to put the nacelle back on, which a lot of them don't. So a lot of thought went into this to be able to, basically have this be able to be installed on your bike and then put everything back the way it was, which some people might want, some people might not, but it's nice to have the option. And a lot of the other kits, at least as far as I could tell, don't give you that option or flexibility. So that's what I like about this. While I've got it in my hand, this is obviously the top triple tree. These are aluminum, obviously lighter and stronger than the originals. And when I say stronger, that is because they have a double clamp top and bottom that the OE ones do not have. These are also have built into them a 5-degree rake. Now, what that's gonna do is not rake the front end of the bike out. What this is doing is in the process of converting your bike from the 41 to the 49, they're keeping the stock geometry correct. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, might even reduce the trail a little bit on it. So definitely look more into that if you're interested in these. I didn't memorize those specs, but at any event, I'm excited about putting these on. So top tree, bottom tree. This is a big beefy one. This is solid all the way through here. I like that. And then we've got the stem itself, big nut for the top here, and that's pretty much it. So the first step in doing this, and the reason it's the first step is because it requires you to let it sit, is we need to get the stem attached to the lower tree. So we're gonna do this with red Loctite, and we're gonna torque it to 120 foot-pounds. There's also a set screw to go in here. We're gonna red Loctite that as well. And then we're gonna let this whole thing sit for 24 hours to let it fully cure. That would be the red Loctite to fully cure. Basically want this to be as strong and as permanent a connection as possible. Can't foresee any reason to ever have to separate these two pieces again. So we want it strong, we want it tight, and we're gonna follow the manufacturer recommendations on letting it sit for 24 hours. So what I'm gonna do is put this together now. We'll move over and start working on the neck to get that prepped. We'll do all the other preparation. We've got new fork legs to assemble, got a bunch of other stuff we can do. And then once that's all done, we'll come back tomorrow and we'll do the installation, or assembly, I guess I should say, of all of it. So that will still all be one video here. Just for me, I'm gonna have to wait the 24 hours. So let's get going on it so we can get some new parts installed. I'm excited. Okay, so apparently I just forgot to hit record here, but what I just did was take the set screw and put it in with some red Loctite, and then I put another dab of red Loctite on top and got that as tight as I could using the small Allen key here. So we're now gonna let this piece sit for 24 hours to cure while we work on everything else, and then we'll come back to this for the final assembly. So we'll leave this here and continue back over at the bike. Okay, so back here at the bike, we've got a couple of steps we've got to take in order to get the frame prepared for the new triple trees. Now, the original triple trees, of course, used 41 millimeter legs, and our new ones are going to use 49 millimeter legs, which obviously are a little bit bigger and are going to need a little bit more clearance to be able to swing around here. The original fork lock plate, this little hole right here is where that pin would go in to stop the fork from turning. This plate is just a little bit too wide to allow those tubes to clear. So we're going to have to clearance along here a little bit in order to get them to fit. That's one thing we need to do. The other thing we need to do is install this fork stop plate onto the top here. Now, I've already done a couple of steps. These yellow lines were just for me to be able to see how far up this plate was gonna sit. So I held this in place here, I marked it, so that what I did was come through here with a file and just knock off the little kind of bumps in the paint or powder coating on this frame so that I could get it as perfectly flat and smooth as it could be so that we can get this to sit down as flat and as flush, and ultimately when we bolt it on, as securely and straight as possible. So with the surface prepped, what we have to do now is drill 2 holes in order to fit the bolts that go through here and secure this onto the bike. So that is gonna be the next thing I need to do. So I'm gonna mark these holes and start drilling them out until I can get I think it's 5/16 hardware through here. Okay, so with the holes drilled, we'll do a test fit of our plate. We've got some hardware here, and perfect. So obviously these will get nuts on the bottom when we go to put this on permanently. For the moment, I'm gonna leave it off so we can continue with the rest of the prep we need to do here. Okay, as you can see here, I've made a couple more marks. We're gonna need to clearance this. There's a little ledge here, and we're gonna cut this off from the widest point back here, pretty close to the backbone of the bike, not all the way. So basically from here to here and here to here. Gotta take this ledge off. So I'm gonna start working on that, and we'll show you what progress we make. Okay, we've got both sides of the fork lock plate clearanced. I actually went a little bit more than what they suggested just because I thought it looked a little bit better. So what we've got to do now is just clean this up, just make sure we've got all the metal out of the way of the bike. We covered it all up, but still. Throw some paint on here, let it dry, and then we can continue on with doing our bearings and getting this trees put on here. So stick around and we'll keep rolling. All right, we're gonna take a little break from being over at the bike while the paint dries over on the neck, and we're gonna start putting the fork legs together. So first step here is, before we even get to the cartridges, is we've just gotta get our new leg assemblies assembled. Assemblies assembled? Yeah. So what I've got here is a mix of some new and used parts, and obviously we want new fork sliders, so that's here. These are obviously chrome. They are 2 over, like I mentioned. I do think black would have looked good on this bike, but truthfully, they are so expensive for the black coated fork tubes, and I think the chrome's gonna look just fine. So that's what we're doing. I've got a set of takeoff lowers. So these are off of a newer bagger, I don't know, Street Glide, Road Glide, something like that. Something somebody swapped, and they're still in good shape. Cleaned them out on the inside, so we can roll with these for sure. And then we need all the little components you need to get these assembled. And this is the kind of stuff where if you were doing an installation like this, let's say 2-over tubes on a bike that already was a 49mm, you could reuse a lot of this stuff from your own internals. Or like in a video we did previously, if you don't want to take your fork legs apart because you just want to leave them assembled, you can just buy replacements of these little parts. They're not very expensive, you just got to find them. So we've got some new bushings for the sliders. We've got seals, obviously, the seal protector rings, the lock rings, and then we've got, I think I mentioned the top out springs, did I or not? They're there. And then we've got the oil lock cups as well. And then finally, bolts and washers for the cartridge at the bottom. So putting this together is a pretty simple process. Just gotta do it in the right order and follow the steps so you don't ruin your seals and have a leak. Definitely something we've done on the channel a whole bunch of times before. If you wanna see it in more depth, you can check out one of those videos. There's a bunch of them. I'll try and put a link for you so you can go find that. But in this one, we're just gonna kind of run through it quickly just to keep things moving because I'm sure this video is getting pretty long. So I'm gonna go ahead and start putting this together, and we'll check back in when we're ready to go with the cartridges. All right, and just like that, we've got our legs assembled. Like I said, real simple, just you need the right tools, follow the instructions, procedure, I guess, whatever, and you're good to go. So I'm gonna grab the cartridges and we'll get those installed. Shouldn't take too much longer, and we'll have these legs ready to roll as soon as we're ready to get back to the bike. All right, we've got our cartridges all laid out here, ready to go. I've taken everything out of the bags, got everything organized, did a couple little preparatory steps. One thing I like to do right at the beginning is put the grease on the O-ring and grease the threads of the caps so that they're ready to go when you've got everything done and you don't need to put everything down and make a whole mess. So just a couple little steps like that. The one thing here that's a little bit different than your regular cartridge installation is obviously we've got, I mentioned 2-over tubes. We need to do something to the cartridges to get them to get up to the right height. And that's where these guys from FXR Division come into play. This is a great little simple solution to getting yourself a 2-over cartridge, which is just an extension to go on the bottom of the damper here. So all we're gonna do is thread these into the bottoms of each of the cartridges, tighten them down, put some Loctite on them, of course, and we'll have 2-over cartridges. So there are other ways to do this. You can use Dyna cartridges, Dyna length tubes, all kinds of stuff like that. You just have to be really careful if you're gonna go any of those other routes that you match the length of the cartridge to the length of the tube properly. You don't wanna have that wrong where, you know, maybe the tubes are actually 2 inches over, but your cartridges are meant for a tube that's only maybe, let's say 1 inch and, I don't know, 3/4 over or something like that. You really wanna get the measurements to be correct. If you possibly can, which you can, so do it. That said, I'm gonna start assembling this and we'll make some progress here. All right, so that easy. Now we got a 2-over cartridge. We're ready to go on the installation on this one. So I guess I'll just run through this as long as we're here. This is our rebound cartridge, which goes on the right side. So make sure you've got the correct fork leg for that. So that is gonna be this one. And obviously we've got our oil cup down there in the bottom. You don't want that thing getting all twisted and turned over. So just be careful moving the fork leg around. Don't forget to install your rebound spring. You get this all assembled and see these springs sitting there at the end. You're gonna be very upset that you have to go back and put these in. Ask me how I know. All right, so we're gonna do that. And then, before I drop the cartridge in, I like to install the pull-up tool on it. Okay. All right, make sure that's seated down in there, which it is, looks really good. And we will go ahead and get the bolt started at the bottom. All right, and then the easiest way to tighten these down is with a 3/8 impact. All right, so we got first part of our first cartridge in. Oops. All right, our next step is we are going to get some oil in here and get the air bled out. So, just get myself set here. Not sure if I've got enough oil in this container or not. Might need to grab another one. All right, so once you get your oil level in and it stops bubbling and bubbling and bubbling, you'll see some little bubbles still. We can start the bleeding process now. So the most important part of this is moving the cartridge itself, not what I'm doing right now, but this can help to get some of the big initial air out to get started. So I like to do this first. Just go a couple of times. And now this is where the real bleeding takes place. And you will be able to feel as the air comes out. So on the rebound cartridge, which this is, you'll feel resistance going up, which is the rebound direction, and then you'll feel nothing going down. So as the air comes out, you'll start to feel that resistance get smooth and even. So you want to do this at least 10 times, and then a little bit more for good measure doesn't hurt. So I like to go back to this, make sure as I move this, I'm not hearing or seeing any air bubbles. And that feels pretty good. Beautiful. All right, so our next step is to set the oil level. And our oil level dropped a little bit low, but I still think we're still above where we need to be. So we're gonna put this in. And then a call out here, when you set this up this way, I can't speak necessarily at this moment to the other methods of doing a 2/over setup, but the Öhlins fluid measurement, which in this case is 140 millimeters, it remains the same with the 2/over tubes. So if you think about it, yeah, your tube is 2 inches longer, but the shock is sitting 2 inches up higher in it. So in order to have the same air gap at the top of the shock between the cartridge and the cap, the 140 millimeter measurement stays the same. So that's a nice, easy little thing. Obviously the quantity of oil that's in there is more, but the air gap is the same. So just pull this fluid until we get everything above 140 millimeters out. Okay, sucking air now, which is good. Beautiful. All right. So let's put this aside for 1 minute. Nope, dripping fluid everywhere. Okay. And we're good there. All right, so now to continue on, now that our oil level is set, we can put our spring in, and spring part number is gonna face up, which is this way. Next thing we're gonna do is put in the preload spacer, which is very small, little silver guy, and then the plastic retainer for the preload spacer. That just sits right on there like that. And put the hold up tool in so we can remove the pull up tool and put the cap on. Okay, turn that till it bottoms out, and then simply tighten the nut down onto the cartridge. All right. Pull up tool out. Now, keeping a little bit of pressure on here to keep this all lined up properly, I'm just gonna pull the tube up, and that's it. All right. Just need a wrench to tighten the cap down. That's gonna be 41 millimeters. Boom. And this one's basically done. We still have to set our preload and our rebound settings, but I'm gonna do that once we get them both done. I just wanna get the other one put together, get it up to this stage, and we'll check back in when I've got both of them ready to go. All right, with both forks fully assembled, we can finish off by the last couple of steps here. First thing is gonna be to just make sure the fork caps are tight. That's number one. Next thing we're gonna do is set the preload. So we're just gonna get that back to 0, and I'm gonna put the correct number of preload turns based on the chart and the instructions. All right, and then last but not least, we will set the rebound and compression adjusters. In this case, this is the fork I just assembled. This is the compression one. Rebound one is over here. Same thing in each. It's going to be 12 clicks from closed. So we're going to spin that valve all the way down. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And that's it. So we've got both our fork legs ready to go. Now we got to jump back over to the bike, finish prepping that, get our trees installed, and we're well on our way to getting this front end done. All right, we're back over at the bike. Paint here is just about ready to go. Let's knock some bearing races out so we can get some new ones put in. Always goes everywhere. All right, so that was our bottom one. Let me put the tool back in and we'll do the top. Yep. Well, that was a little less dramatic, but we've got our two races out. I'm gonna go ahead and clean the inside here and we'll get our new races pressed in. All right, one new bearing race for the bottom. Drop that onto our install tool.
Put the other die up here in the top. Actually, that'll work that way. Let's do this the other way. So what I just did was flip the tool around. When you're pressing or pulling in bearing races like this, or even a full roller bearing, cage bearing, I like to have the side where you're actually turning be on the side that's moving. So basically push it in rather than kind of pull it from the other side. I think it helps it to go in straighter. I wasn't sure if the tool was going to clear down here, but I think it will. So we're going to do it that way if we can. All right. Get this thing started. Okay. All right, there's one in. All right, that looks perfect. Let's grab the other race, get it put in. Okay, so with the bearing races installed, the next thing I'm going to do is do the final install on the plate for the fork stop. So that's just going to drop in with these bolts that are included into those holes that we previously drilled. So that's going to sit right there. And then I've got some lock nuts and washers that I'm going to thread on. And we'll get these tightened down. All right. That feels perfect. And I'm just going to grab a torque wrench and we're going to torque each of these to just 10 foot-pounds. Okay, rocking and rolling. Okay, finally, a little bit of progress that'll actually look like something. So we are ready to put these trees on finally. So I've got some grease put into the races we just installed. I've got our bearings packed with grease. We've got the lower one on here, upper one here. I'm just gonna set this down. And we're gonna slide this in. And actually, one thing I wanna point out, I was talking before about how these are stronger. They use two bolt clamps. That's on the top tree. The bottom one actually has 3 on each side, so even better. So let's get this guy slid in here. All right. Let's get this bearing slid on here. Okay. Wipe some of this grease off my hands, maybe. All right, we've got a dust shield here and our top nut. All right, there's a tree on, already starting to look like something. Very cool. All right, so with that in place, we can continue going with the installation here. So let's get some more parts assembled and let's make something. Okay, so I just realized my microphone was off this whole time, so I'll go back and tell you what I just did after I get these torqued down. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, so what I was explaining before was that we were gonna put the riser onto the triple tree before we put it onto the bike. With the steering head able to be turned the way it is now, and now with a wheel in it locked in a vise, you are able to do this while it's on the bike. I just find it easier to do it when it's off the bike, and then even putting this on gets a little bit easier because you have some kind of leverage to move it around. So put that on and torqued it down to 55 foot-pounds, so that's ready to go. The other thing that's worth calling out here is this piece that's dangling here by this zip tie. So what this is the cover for the ignition switch and where there would have been the OE riser. So the original plate had holes in the side of it, allowing the bars to come out and hid the riser, little teeny riser underneath it. So this one has 3 holes in the top to allow the riser and wiring to pass through it and solid on the sides. So what that's gonna do is obviously allow you to run a taller riser than the OE one. Now, all of this is temporary, as I mentioned before, because we're eventually gonna be not running this plate because we're not gonna be running the headlight nacelle and all that stuff. We're gonna be running a fairing. This riser is 12 inches tall. We're gonna be running a 2-inch bar, so that's 14 inches of total height. Ultimately, I'd like to be using Krause's pullback plate to get the bars a little bit closer. I like that with the 14-inch height combination pretty well on baggers. It's not something I'm trying to do right now because I just want to be able to put this on and not make any other modifications to the nacelle because ultimately we're going to be taking it off. So that all said, when we do take the nacelle off to run the fairing, this will come off and we'll wind up swapping these legs for ones that are 2 inches shorter and putting in the pullback plate that will add those 2 inches back in and then also add, I believe, 1.5 inches of pullback. So all that said, this guy should be ready to go ahead and put onto the bike. So let's go over there and do it. So we're ready to put these on. And actually, one step that I probably should have mentioned that I just took care of off camera is they do call out in the instructions that if you are using your own or some, for some aftermarket riser bushings, you may have clearance issues with the bolts hitting the plate here. And in fact, I did have that. I had a little bit of a clearance issue on these bolts. I mean, such a small issue. Basically, the lettering on the tops of the bolts was making contact with that. So just came through and just basically knocked these down with a flap wheel on the grinder a little bit, and now I've got plenty of clearance on there. So you can use Geezer Engineering's low profile bushings. I just wanted to use the solid bushings, so we went that route. So that all done, let's go ahead and get this put on. All right. Starting to actually see something here. This is starting to look different. I'm digging it. And we're gonna go grab our new legs and I'm gonna slide them into place and see how it looks. I think that's gonna give us a first kind of impression of how this is all coming together. So I'm pretty excited. But in any event, yeah, I'm just gonna snug this bolt down. We'll raise the lift up, get these legs mocked up in place, and we'll go from there. All right, well, this looks awesome. I need a minute to kind of take a look and see what's going on here and kind of where we are, and we'll come right back in a second and keep rolling on this. Okay, well, I just wanted to see if I could give you all kind of a step back view like I just got, because man, I think this thing looks so good. I'm excited about the additional height. I'm not sure where this is actually sitting in terms of where the front wheel will be. Probably pretty close, and I'm looking at the rear, the kind of lean of the bike front to back, and definitely it's sitting up higher in the front, so when we get that rear raised up, we should be sitting nice and level. At least that's the hope. But I'm loving this. I think this is great. I've been super happy with these trees from Geezer. You know, some things, you know, small outfits can go either way. Either they can be really dedicated and put a whole lot of effort and quality control into everything they make, and sometimes smaller outfits can be, I don't know, a little bit fly by night and maybe not have the best quality stuff, but at least from what I'm seeing of this, and this is the first of their stuff I've ever used, I'm really digging it. That said, we are gonna set up a dealer account with these guys, and we're gonna start to do this stuff here at the shop. So if you're interested in any of this stuff, you can give us a call. But if you're not local to us, or you know, you're trying to get this on your own, I'll put links to their website where you can buy this kit and find out a whole bunch of information about it. Just go check it out. So obviously we get nothing for that. I'm just trying to, you know, spread the positivity here, because these are great and I think you should go get them if you're trying to do something like this on an early bagger. They also have stuff for late model baggers too, but anyway, you can go check all that out. So in any event, where I want to get to before the end of this video is I want the front wheel back on the ground. I want to see how the bike sits. Obviously the back hasn't been done yet, but that's what I want. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna get the final torque on the bolts here. I've got some washers to go in there, and we're gonna put Loctite on them too. So I'm gonna get these tightened down, and then once that's tightened, I am going to get the front wheel in, and we'll try to get at least an initial kind of setup on the swing back, just so I can get it a little bit closer than where it is, because it's definitely still too loose, I think. But anyway, let me get to tightening these, and we'll get that wheel on. Okay, it's a long sequence. You got 3 bolts. You got to tighten them a little bit at a time. You got to keep alternating and going and going and going, because as you tighten the others loosen, just like any other fork. So you just got to keep going until you get them all to the torque spec, which in this case is 14 foot-pounds, where none of them are moving. So it took about, I don't know, maybe 10 rounds on that side. Let's see what we do on this side. All right, a little on fire there in the whole bicep. Okay, So that is our legs tightened onto the lower tree. Now I think, and maybe for me, this is where it's gonna start to come together a little bit. I think I wanna get that wheel mocked up in there. So let me get the bike raised up a little bit more, get some of this junk out of the way. Let's get that wheel in and see what it looks like. All right, so I think I mentioned these wheels I got as a set, kind of see how I liked them. The rotors came with the wheels, the tires came with the wheels. Ultimately, if I wind up keeping these, we're gonna put new tires on, probably change the brake rotors as well. But at least for the time being, this is kind of how it's gonna be until we can have a permanent decision. So it looks like we gotta come down a little here. That's good news. There we go. Okay, axle. Okay. Get an initial snug on this axle. All right, and I did anti-seize the axle, and I'm gonna torque this nut because I'm actually not even sure if this wheel is gonna have to come off again right away. I mean, maybe it will down the road for something else, but for what we're doing now, this might be it, and I don't wanna forget to do any of those steps by doing just a test fit. So I'm gonna torque this now so that it's ready to roll if we decide that it doesn't have to come off again. All right. Beautiful. All right. Boom. All right, well, the front end is on, and that's what I promised we were gonna get done in this video, so I think that's where we're gonna leave it for today. I think this video is probably getting pretty long and probably pushing the limits of most people's patience or interest, so I'm gonna cut this off. I've got way more stuff planned, so we're gonna have another part coming really soon. We've got bars to put on. We still have to figure out what we're gonna do with this rear fender. I've been listening to everyone's comments on the last video. I really appreciate it. Keep them coming. Any ideas you've got on this bike, I'd love to hear them. This is kind of a fun one for me. I've just got some ideas in my head, but open to suggestions and creativity. I think that's half the fun. So I do have something figured out for the swing arm, so maybe we'll get into that in the next video. I don't know, maybe it'll be the bars. I don't know, one way or the other. I gotta get all this cleaned up and figure out what our next steps are, but like I said, thanks for watching. This is gonna be the end for this one, and we'll see you next time.